The rain pounded against the windows of the great hall like a desperate fist demanding entry. Ruarth MacRae, leader of the most powerful clan in the Northern Highlands, watched the storm with the same stony expression he had displayed before the Council of Elders. His dark hair, tied back in a low ponytail that revealed his harsh features, glistened with coppery highlights in the torchlight. He was a man forged in battle and tempered by responsibility, a warrior whose heart beat only for duty. The agreement must be sealed before the winter solstice. Lord Alastair Satterland's voice echoed through the hall like a proclamation. Edifa will make a magnificent wife for you, MacRae. Beauty, lineage, and most importantly, he paused deliberately, the lands you need to protect your borders. Ruarth clenched his jaw. He knew it was true. The MacRae clan had suffered devastating losses in recent harvests. The arid lands of the north were not productive enough, and the neighboring clans were waiting for the opportunity to attack. Marrying the Sutherlands would mean survival and peace, but it would also mean betraying everything he believed in. Lady Fiona Sutherland approached him with measured steps, her blue silk dress rustling against the castle stones. She was beautiful. No one could deny it. Her hair was as blonde as ripe wheat, her eyes as green as emeralds, and her smile hid the cunning of a woman who had never lost a social battle. "My lord," she said, her voice like poisoned honey, "it would be an honor to unite our houses. Together, we would be invincible." But Ruarth felt nothing. No warmth, no desire, and not even the simple camaraderie that should exist between future spouses. Only the crushing weight of duty had rested on his shoulders since his father died in battle, leaving him in command of a fractured and desperate clan. "I will consider it," he replied, his deep voice echoing through the hall. That night, unable to sleep, Ruarth went for a walk around the castle grounds. The storm had ceased, leaving the air cool and heavy with the scent of wet earth. It was then that he saw her near the east wall, where the castle gardens gave way to the common lands. A woman was kneeling in a small vegetable garden. Even in the dim light of dawn, Ruarth could make out the delicacy of her movements as she harvested carrots, cleaning them with hands that were clearly accustomed to hard work. Her brown hair fell in messy waves over her shoulders. When she looked up at the sky beginning to lighten, Ruarth saw her face. My Cameron knew her by name, as he did everyone who lived under his protection, but he had never actually seen her before. She was one of the poorest in the village. She was a woman who lived alone after losing her family to the fever the previous year. Yet there was something about her, a quiet dignity and a simple, devastating beauty that needed no silks or jewels to shine. She must have felt his gaze, because she turned abruptly and their eyes met. For a moment that seemed eternal, time stood still. Then May quickly looked down, ashamed to have been discovered near the castle, and picked up her basket with trembling hands. Ruarth felt something stir in his chest. Something dangerous. Something that threatened to destroy everything he had built with so much sacrifice. Before continuing, tell us in the comments which country you are joining us from. I love knowing how far our stories reach, and it makes me happy to feel that we are sharing this journey through the Highlands with people from all corners of the world. Subscribe so you don't miss a single story. The Great Hall of MacRae Castle buzzed with the energy of 50 voices talking at once. The Council of Elders had gathered, and the tension was palpable. Ewan Fraser, the castle's steward and Ruarth's right-hand man, banged his staff on the stone floor, demanding silence. "Order!" His harsh voice cut through the murmur like a knife. He had the floor. Ruarth stood slowly, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the oak table. He had not been able to get Maerta out of his mind since he saw her that morning 3 days ago, but now, facing the realities of his clan, he needed to focus all his attention on survival. Lord Sutherland had made a generous offer. He began, choosing each word carefully. Marriage to Lady Fiona would bring fertile lands from the east, access to trade routes, and the military alliance we need to protect our borders. "Then it is decided," exclaimed one of the elders, banging the table enthusiastically. "Finally, the Lord will take a wife." But Dunker, Ruarth's best friend and most loyal warrior, remained silent. His dark eyes studied the Laird with an intensity that spoke of years of friendship and shared battles. He knew Ruarth better than anyone, and the stiffness in his shoulders told Dunker that his friend was not convinced. "What is the deadline?" Duncan finally asked. "Before the winter solstice," Rorid replied. "6 weeks." A murmur rippled through the room. It was a short time in which to prepare for a wedding of such magnitude, but everyone understood the urgency. The Sutherlands were not known for their patience, and rejecting the offer could turn them into enemies. As the council discussed the details, Ruarid let his mind wander. He could see May's face with perfect clarity, the way she had held the carrots as if they were treasures in her dirt-stained hands, the way her eyes had widened when she saw him. There was something about her that had awakened a part of him that he had thought was dead, a part that still remembered how to dream. The meeting lasted until nightfall. When the elders finally withdrew, satisfied with the wedding plans, Ruarid remained alone in the hall, watching the dying fire in the hearth. "You're restless." Duncan's voice broke the silence. Ruarid didn't turn. "I'm doing what I must." "That's not what I asked." There was a long silence. Finally, Ruarid spoke in a low voice. "Have you ever wondered if there's more to life than duty and sacrifice, Duncan?" Duncan approached and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "But we are Lairds and warriors. We don't have the luxury of dreaming." That night, Ruarid could not sleep. At dawn, he found himself walking towards the eastern fields again, as if guided by an invisible force. There she was, Mary, kneeling in her small garden and working the soil with a dedication bordering on the sacred. This time he did not hide, but walked straight towards her. May saw him approaching, panic crossing her face. She stood up awkwardly, wiped her hands on her threadbare apron, and bowed her head in respect. "My lord," she said, her voice soft and musical, "forgive me if I have invaded the castle grounds. I was only harvesting." Ruarid interrupted her. She obeyed slowly, and when their eyes met, he felt the same pang in his chest that he had experienced days before. "What is your name?" My lord, I am Cameron. Do you live alone?" It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "Since the fever took my family last year." "Yes." Ruarid looked at the small vegetable garden. What she had accomplished with so little was impressive. There were neat rows of vegetables and medicinal herbs growing in makeshift pots. Every inch of soil was used wisely and carefully. "You have a knack with plants," he said. A slight blush colored May's cheeks. "It's all I have, my lord. The earth doesn't lie or cheat. If you treat it well, it will take care of you in return." Before Ruarid could reply, the sound of hooves echoed on the road. A group of horsemen were approaching, led by Lady Fiona Sutherland, riding a snow-white steed. Her blonde hair shone in the morning sun. Her father rode beside her, followed by a retinue of servants and guards. My face paled as I knew what this visit meant. Everyone in the village knew that Laird was under pressure to marry Sutherland's daughter. Without thinking twice, she crouched down, picked up her basket, and prepared to disappear before they noticed her. But it was too late. "What do we have here?" Fiona's voice was as sweet as poison as she dismounted with studied grace. The great lord ran his disdainful gaze up and down May. "A peasant girl, Lady Fiona." Rory kept his voice neutral. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "We decided to surprise you, my love," replied Fiona, and walking towards him and completely ignoring May. Father was eager to discuss the final arrangements for our wedding. Lord Alas Sutherland had also dismounted, and his shrewd eyes studied the scene with calculating interest. He was a man who had built his power on manipulation and strategy, and he hadn't got this far without learning to read people. McCree greeted him with a nod. "I see you are inspecting your lands personally." "Most admirable." May tried to slip away, but one of Sutherland's guards blocked her path. "Where do you think you're going, you filthy peasant?" he growled. "You have not been given permission to retire." The atmosphere changed instantly. Ruarid's hand flew to the hilt of his sword, and his eyes darkened dangerously. "Be careful how you speak to those under my protection." His voice was deadly and still. The guard backed away, but Fiona laughed. It was a crystalline, calculated sound. "Ruarid, don't be so sensitive. The man was just being efficient. He must have work to do. We don't want to distract her from her humble duties." May felt the humiliation burn on her cheeks. She knew exactly what Fiona was doing, marking her territory and establishing hierarchies. It was a cruel reminder that there was a world of difference between her and the Ler, a difference she could never bridge. "With your permission, my lord," Mary murmured, keeping her head down. But as she tried to pass, Fiona accidentally knocked her basket over, spilling carrots and turnips all over the floor. "Oh, how clumsy of me," Fiona said without a shred of sincerity. Mary immediately knelt down to pick up her vegetables, tears stinging her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. And then it happened. Laird knelt down beside her and began to help her pick up the vegetables. The silence that followed was deafening. A lord kneeling in the mud, helping a peasant girl. It was unthinkable. It was scandalous. But it was Laird. Fiona's voice was laden with warning. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he placed the last carrot in May's basket, stood up and extended his hand to help her up. When their hands touched, they both felt an electric spark run through them. Once Mayeri was on her feet, Ruid finally addressed Sutherland's group. "In the McRae lands, we treat everyone with respect, from the highest noble to the humblest farmer. If that offends you, Lord Sutherland, then perhaps we should reconsider our alliance." Alistair Sutherland's face turned red with rage, but he was too cunning to give anything away. He forced a tense smile. Of course," he said. "We are simply adjusting to your customs. Very noble, I must say." But when he looked at May, his eyes held a promise of revenge. Rurid turned to May one last time. "You may go." She nodded, not daring to speak, and quickly walked away, clutching her basket to her chest. But as she walked, she could feel the reader's eyes on her back, a feeling that was both terrifying and exciting. That night, at the castle, dinner was tense. Fiona maintained a facade of charm, but her eyes flashed with cold rage every time she looked at Rurid. Lord Alistair observed everything with the patience of a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was Lady Morak MacLeod, the castle's housekeeper, who broke the uncomfortable silence when she served dessert. "My lord," she said in her husky voice, "the kitchens have been having trouble with supplies. Several of our medicinal herbs have run out, and the cook is desperate to get more." Rurid looked at her, and for a moment, something passed between them. Morak had served 3 generations of McRae's. She was astute and observant, and always appeared when she was needed. Any suggestions?" asked Rurid. "Well," Morak pretended to think, "there is a young woman in the village, Me Cameron, who knows more about herbs than anyone. Perhaps we could hire her temporarily to help us restock. There is a young woman in the village called Mai Cameron, who has a reputation for knowing more about herbs than anyone else. Perhaps we could hire her temporarily to help us replenish our supplies." Ewan Fraser, who had been sitting in silence drinking wine, frowned. "The poor girl who lives alone is not suitable." "We need the herbs," Morag replied firmly, "and she needs the work. It seems like a perfect solution to me." "Surely there is someone more suitable," Fiona interjected in an icy voice. "Surely there is someone more suitable, someone of better standing." "Herbs don't care about social standing," Morag replied. "Only knowledge matters." Ruar made a decision he knew would change everything. "Send for her tomorrow morning," he ordered. "Have her come to the castle. We will pay her fairly for her work." Fiona's face hardened, but she could not protest without seeming cruel or unreasonable. She nodded stiffly, excusing herself from the table and citing travel fatigue. Once everyone had left, Duncan approached Rorit. "Do you know what you're doing?" "No," Rorit admitted, "but for the first time in years I feel I must." That night in his small cabin, he sat by the fire reflecting on the day's events. He knew he had caught the Lord's attention, but he also knew that attention could be dangerous. Lady Fiona Sutherland was not a woman to forgive real or imagined insults. When dawn came, she was startled by a knock at her door. It was a nervous, panting young page from the castle. "Miss Myra Cameron," he announced formally, "the Lord McRae requires your presence at the castle. You must come immediately to discuss a temporary position in the kitchens." My heart raced. She knew that accepting meant entering a dangerous world where one false step could destroy her, but refusing a direct order from Laird was unthinkable. "Tell Laird I'll be there in an hour," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. As she got ready, choosing the least worn out of her few dresses, Mai looked at herself in the small, broken mirror that had belonged to her mother. She wasn't as beautiful as Lady Fiona. She had no jewels or silks, but she had dignity, knowledge, and hands that could create life from the earth. That would have to be enough. The road to the castle had never seemed so long. With each step, she was brought closer to an unknown destination, to a future that excited her as much as it terrified her. When the gates of MacRae Castle opened before her, Me Cameron crossed the threshold, unaware that this simple act would change her life and that of the Lord forever. The kitchens of MacRae Castle were a chaotic world of steam, fire, and shouted orders. May stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the place's size. In her small cabin, she had cooked for one person. Here they prepared food for over 100 people every day. "You must be the herb girl." A sturdy woman with a face reddened by the heat approached her, wiping her hands on a stained apron. "I'm Nisa, the head cook. Mrs. Morag says you know about medicinal and culinary plants." "Yes, ma'am," May replied, trying not to sound as nervous as she felt. "I grow herbs in my garden, and I recognize the ones growing wild in the fields." Nessa studied her critically, but her expression softened. "Well, we urgently need to replenish our supplies. The last herb cook we had, let's just say she couldn't tell time from you. She nearly killed the steward." Despite her nerves, Mai felt a spark of professional indignation. "You is poisonous. Anyone can tell the difference." "Exactly." Nessa smiled for the first time. "I think you and I will get along, girl. Come, I'll show you our pitiful reserves." Over the next few hours, Mai immersed herself in the work. She cataloged what was left, identified the herbs that were rancid or had been stored poorly, and made a list of what they needed. It was work she loved, and for a moment she could forget where she was and who might be watching her. But she did not go unnoticed. From a second-story window, Rurid watched her work. He had found excuses to pass by the kitchens 3 times that morning, feeling increasingly ridiculous with each visit, yet unable to stay away. There was something about the way Mai moved with purpose and knowledge that fascinated him. "Are you playing with fire?" Duncan's voice startled him. Rurid didn't turn around. "I'm just making sure our kitchens are well stocked." Duncan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And I suppose you've personally checked the kitchens 3 times this morning, purely by coincidence." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Rurid," Duncan sighed. "We've been friends since childhood. We fought together at Culloden. I know you better than you know yourself, and I'm telling you now, be careful. The Satterlands are not the kind of enemies you want to make." "I haven't done anything inappropriate." "Not yet," Duncan agreed, "but everyone notices the way you look at her, especially Fiona. It's as if she's been summoned." Lady Fiona appeared in the hallway, her emerald green dress rustling against the stone floor. Her face was a mask of sweetness, but her eyes were icy. "Rurid, dear," she purred. "I've been looking for you. I thought we could stroll through the gardens and discuss the wedding arrangements." "I have business to attend to," he replied more sharply than he intended. Fiona's mask slipped for a moment. "Business? I see. Business that includes watching the maids work." The tension in the air was palpable. Duncan cleared his throat uncomfortably and quickly excused himself, leaving them alone. "No, Fiona." She raised a hand, her voice losing all pretense of sweetness. "Don't insult me with excuses. I know what I saw this morning, Rurit. I saw the way you looked at her and the way you knelt in the mud for her. I was being courteous to someone under my protection." "Courteous." Fiona laughed a humorless laugh. "Lords don't kneel for peasants, unless there's something more." Rurid confronted her directly. "There's nothing between that woman and me. She's just a temporary worker." "Good." Fiona moved closer and placed a possessive hand on his chest. "It would be a shame if something were to interfere with our agreement. Father is not a patient man, and he has ways of ensuring his investments are protected." The threat was clear. Rurid felt rage boiling inside him, but he controlled it. He knew that every word and action at that moment could have consequences for his entire clan. "The agreement will be fulfilled," he finally said. "You have my word." Fiona studied his face for a long moment, then smiled with satisfaction. "That's all I need to hear about those gardens for now." As they walked together, Rurid couldn't help but take one last look back at the kitchens. At that precise moment, May looked up and their eyes met through the window. Time seemed to stand still, And in that instant, they both felt the impossibility and inevitability of what was growing between them. The following days established a dangerous routine. May arrived at the castle each morning, worked in the kitchens and herb gardens, and left before nightfall. She was efficient and respectful, staying away from the main halls where the nobility gathered. But the castle had eyes everywhere. Lady Morag MacLeod watched everything with maternal interest. She had seen Laird being born. She had watched him grow up under the weight of responsibilities that were too great for him. In all those years, she had never seen him look at a woman the way he looked at May Cameron. "Girl," she said to May one afternoon as they sorted dried herbs, "can you read?" May blushed a little. "My mother taught me before she died." "Good," Morag said. "The castle has a library. If you ever need a quiet place to think, for example, it's in the West Wing. No one goes there in the evenings, except perhaps Laird when he wants some peace and quiet." The message was clear, and May felt her heart race. "Lady Morag, you shouldn't do many things, child," the housekeeper interrupted. "But the heart knows no shoulds. Just be careful. The walls have ears, and not everyone in this castle is a friend." That warning proved prophetic. That same night, as May crossed one of the less traveled hallways on her way back to the kitchens, she heard voices rising from a nearby room. She recognized Lord Alistair Sutherland's voice immediately. "I don't care what you have to do, Fiona. That marriage must happen. Without the McCrae lands, our plans to expand north will fail." "I know, Father." Fiona's voice was tense, but it was impossible to read that man. "He shows no emotion. He doesn't respond to my charms." "Then find another way," he said. Alistair's voice was cold and calculating. "There is a peasant girl who seems to have captured his attention. Use her. Destroy her if necessary. Do whatever you must to ensure that McKay has no choice but to marry you." My heart pounded against my ribs and I recoiled. She knew she should leave and forget what she had heard, but her feet were rooted to the spot. "What if he refuses anyway?" Fiona asked. There was a heavy silence, then Alistair spoke in a deadly voice. "Then we will make sure he has no clan to lead. There are ways to destroy a man without spilling blood, my daughter. Debts that can be called in, secrets that can be revealed. The Mackay clan has skeletons in its closet. We just need to find them." My daughter had heard enough. She slipped away quietly, her mind spinning. She needed to warn Laird. But how could she, a nobody, a peasant girl, do that? Without proof, if she accused the Sutherlands, it would be her word against that of powerful nobles. Lost in thought, she didn't see the figure in the corridor until she bumped straight into him. "Careful," he said. Rory's voice was deep and concerned as he held her steady. She looked up and, for a moment, was lost in the intensity of his dark eyes. His hand still held her warmly and firmly, and she could feel his heart beating where their bodies touched. "I'm sorry, I didn't," she managed to say. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, noticing how pale her face was. "You're shaking." This was the perfect opportunity to tell him what she had heard, but before she could speak, footsteps approached down the corridor. Instinctively, Raret gently pushed her into a window recess and half hid her with his body as Iwan Fraser passed by, greeting Lady with a nod before continuing on his way. The proximity was overwhelming. She could smell lead scent, a mixture of leather, pine, and something indefinably masculine. She could feel the heat radiating from his body and see the small scars on his neck that spoke of past battles. May sounded like a caress on Rorid's lips. "Talk to me, Bo," he said. "What scared you?" She should get away. She should maintain the proper distance between herself and her lord. But the genuine concern in his voice broke down her defenses. "I heard things," she whispered. "Things I shouldn't have heard." "What kind of things?" Before she could answer, another voice cut through the intimacy of the moment. "Ruarid, where are you, dear Fiona?" Panic crossed May's face. If Fiona found them together, it would be disastrous. "Go," Ruarid ordered in a low voice. "Take the service staircase. Quickly!" May obeyed, but as she walked away, she looked back once. The look on Elle's face would haunt her for days, a mixture of frustration, desire, and longing. That night, May couldn't sleep. She lay on her narrow cot, staring at the beams of her cabin ceiling and replaying every moment and every word in her mind. She knew she was playing a dangerous game that could destroy her. But what she didn't know was that, in the castle, Ruarid was also awake, fighting his own internal battle. The next day dawned with news that would shake everything. At dawn, a messenger arrived at the castle bearing a letter with the Sutherland seal. You and Fraser took it directly to Lord Dundee. Duncan broke the seal and read the contents, his face becoming increasingly stony. Bad news, said Duncan, who had been present when the messenger arrived. The Sutherlands have brought the wedding forward. Rued dropped the letter on his desk. They want it to take place in 2 weeks, not 6. They claim to have received information that other clans are contemplating an attack on our borders, and that only an immediate alliance can deter them. It's true. I don't know, Ruarid admitted, but the threat is clear. Either I accept their terms, or they will withdraw the offer completely. Duncan cursed under his breath. It's a power play. Suitorland is cornering you. I know. Raret ran a hand through his hair. The worst part is, he might be right about the threat. We can't risk being left without allies. Meanwhile, in the kitchens, oblivious to the drama unfolding above, May worked quietly, preparing herbal poultices for the castle's medicine chest. Mrs. Morak entered with a somber expression. Child, I need to warn you, she said quietly. The wedding has been brought forward. There will be a lot of preparations and chaos. Keep your head down and don't draw attention to yourself. Why are you telling me this? Asked May. Morag looked at her with wise, sad eyes. Because I've seen how Laird looks at you, and I've seen how you look at him. I've lived long enough to know that some loves are destined to destroy everything they touch, no matter how pure they are. The words hit May like a punch. No, there's nothing, oh child. Morag touched her cheek gently. The heart lies even to itself. Just be careful. Lady Fiona is no fool, and her father is as dangerous as if he had been summoned by the devil himself. Fiona appeared in the kitchen doorway, which was something she had never done before. Her presence made everyone stop working, and tension filled the air. Ah, here is our little herb expert, Fiona said with poisonous sweetness. Mary, is it? Yes, my lady. May curtsied, keeping her eyes down. How charming. Fiona walked around her slowly, like a predator assessing its prey. So humble, so hard-working. Tell me, do you enjoy working here at the castle? Yes, my lady. Good, good. Fiona stopped in front of her. It would be a shame if something disrupted this convenient arrangement. After all, peasants like you should be grateful for any opportunity that comes your way. Isn't that right? The message was clear. She knew, or at least suspected as much. I am very grateful, my lady, Mary replied, keeping her voice steady despite the fear that ran through her. Excellent. Fiona smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then you will know to keep your place, away from matters that do not concern you and people who are far above your station. May nodded, unable to speak. When Fiona finally left, an uncomfortable silence remained in the kitchens. Nasa was the first to speak. That woman is pure venom, she whispered. Be careful, child. But it was too late for caution. The battle lines had been drawn, and May was caught up in a war she hadn't sought but couldn't avoid. That night, defying all rules of decorum and reason, May walked to the west wing of the castle and the library that Morak had mentioned. She didn't know what she expected to find there. All she knew was that she needed a moment of peace before her world fell apart completely. The library was beautiful, filled with leather-bound books and the scent of old paper. Moonlight filtered through the tall windows, creating silvery patterns on the stone floor. There, standing in front of the window, was Ruarid. He turned when he heard her enter. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air crackled with unspoken tension, unspoken words and forbidden desires. You shouldn't be here, he finally said. But there was no conviction in his voice. I know, May stepped in, but I needed to tell you something, Myri. There was warning and longing in her voice. The Satterlands. The words came in a rush. I overheard Lord Alistair and Lady Fiona talking. They're planning something. They mentioned secrets and ways to destroy the clan if I didn't go through with the marriage. Ruarid approached her, his face hardening. What else did you hear? She told him everything, and as she spoke, she saw the fury growing in his eyes. By the time she had finished, he was standing so close that she could see the golden specks in his dark irises. Thank you for warning me, he said hoarsely. But this puts you in danger. If Fiona suspects you heard, I don't care, Mary interrupted, surprised by her own courage. I couldn't let you go into this alone. Why? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why do you care about me? It was the question neither of them had dared to ask, the one that would change everything. Mary looked into his eyes and saw the same conflict reflected there. She made the bravest decision of her life. Because when you look at me, I don't see Lord. I see a man who carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. A man who deserves to choose his own destiny at least once in his life. Rory raised a hand and gently brushed her cheek with his knuckles. The touch was electric, sending shivers down her spine. Her name was both a prayer and a curse. If only she were free, if only things were different. But they weren't. She took a step back, breaking the spell before they did something irreversible. You are the Laird. You have responsibilities in a clan that depends on you. What about what I want? The frustration in her voice was palpable. Doesn't it matter? Not when hundreds of lives depend on your decisions. Mai blinked away the tears. That's why you're a good lord, Laird. You always put your people first. Before he could reply, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Instinctively, they pulled apart, but not quickly enough. E. Fraser appeared in the doorway, his face hardening when he saw them together. My lord, he said tensely, Lady Fiona has been looking for you. He looked at May disapprovingly. You shouldn't be in this part of the castle. She was looking for a book, Laird lied. I gave her permission. Ewan didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Of course, my lord, he continued, but I suggest that Miss Cameron return to the kitchens. May curtsied and left, feeling both men's gazes on her back. Once she had gone, Ewan closed the door and turned to Laird. Are you crazy? He hissed. Do you know what would have happened if Fiona had found you together? Nothing happened, Laird replied, but even to his own ears it sounded weak. Not yet. Ewan stepped closer. Laird, I've known you since you were a child. I know you're going through hell, but getting involved with that girl will only bring disaster for her, for you and for the whole clan. I know. Laird slumped into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I know. End this, Ewan insisted. Send her away. Send her back to her cabin before it's too late. But Laird couldn't. Every fiber of his being rebelled against the idea, and that rebellion terrified him more than any battle he had ever faced. In her cabin, May sat in the darkness, hugging her knees to her chest. She knew she had to give up and walk away before things got worse. But the idea of never seeing Laird again hurt her physically. She had discovered that love was the cruelest enemy of all because it could not be fought with swords or strategies. She could only surrender or suffer, and she feared that the suffering had only just begun. The next morning dawned gray and threatening, with heavy clouds foreshadowing a storm. May woke up with an unease that she couldn't shake off. She had dreamed of disturbed earth and buried secrets waiting to be uncovered. She did not know that this dream was prophetic. Work at the castle had increased dramatically due to the accelerated preparations for the wedding. Lady Fiona had brought her own maids with her, elegant women who looked at the McCrae servants with barely concealed disdain. The atmosphere in the castle was tense, like a string about to snap. May had been assigned the task of expanding the herb garden at the back of the castle, an area that the former gardener had abandoned years ago. Breaking up the compacted soil was hard work, but May liked it. It gave her time to think and process the events of the last few days. She was digging near the old stone wall when her shovel struck something solid. It wasn't a rock, the sound was different, more hollow. Carefully, she began to dig around the object, her curiosity growing with each shovelful of earth she removed. Finally, a small wooden box, about the size of a book, emerged. It was rotten in places, but still intact. With trembling hands, May opened it. Inside were rolled-up documents, the paper yellowed and fragile with age, as well as a medallion. The medallion was silver, though darkened by time, and the McRae coat of arms was engraved on one side. However, when she turned it over, she saw another inscription on the back, a name she didn't recognize, and the date 1702. The documents were written in an ancient Gaelic that she could barely decipher, but certain words stood out: treason, injustice, stolen lands. What have you found? May spun around. Ewan Fraser was standing behind her, his eyes fixed on the box and its contents. There was something in his expression, akin to fear, that made May instinctively clasp the locket to her chest. "Just an old box," she replied, trying to sound casual. "Probably junk from years ago." "Let me see it." It wasn't a request. May hesitated. All her instincts were screaming at her that these objects were important and that Ewan didn't want them discovered. But she was just a peasant and he was the castle steward. She had no real choice. Slowly, she handed over the box. Ewan examined its contents, his face growing paler with each passing second. By the time he reached the medallion, his hands were visibly shaking. "Where exactly did you find this?" May pointed to where she had been digging. Ewan looked at the area, then back at the box, and something in his expression changed. It became calculating. "This is the property of the castle," he said finally. "I will inform the lord of your find. In the meantime, don't mention it to anyone. Understood?" "Yes, sir." May nodded, but a voice inside her whispered that something was very wrong. Ewan left with the ball, and May was left alone with dirt under her fingernails and an uneasy feeling in her stomach. Unbeknownst to him, she had managed to stash one of the documents in her apron in a last-second impulse she couldn't explain. That night, in the privacy of her cabin, May spread the document out on her table. With the help of a candle and hours of patience, she managed to decipher some of its contents. It was a letter written over 100 years ago. It was about a man named Ian Cameron, who had been the steward of McRae Castle. He had been accused of stealing land and funds from the clan and executed for treason. However, the letter, written by someone named Seamus, perhaps a priest, claimed that Ian was innocent and had been framed by the real thief, who had then taken his place. The surname Cameron struck her like a bolt of lightning. It was her surname. Could this Cameron be her ancestor? Her family had lived on these lands for generations, but her grandmother had always avoided talking about the past. There was pain in her eyes whenever the subject was mentioned. If this was true, it meant that her family had been dishonored unjustly and that their lands had been stolen. Someone at McRae Castle knew the truth and had literally buried it. She needed answers, and she knew exactly where to look. The next day, she found an excuse to go to the castle chapel. Father Seamus, the clan's current priest, was an elderly man with a surprisingly sharp memory. He was known for keeping the clan's records and for knowing all the ancient stories. She found him in the sacristy, sorting candles. "Father," May began nervously, "may I ask you a question about the clan's history?" He looked at her with piercing eyes. "Of course, my child. What would you like to know? Does the name I. Cameron sound familiar?" The change in the father was immediate. His face tensed, and he stopped what he was doing with his hands. "Why do you ask about that name?" "It's my surname," May replied. "I found something that suggests there was injustice in the past." Seamus was silent for a long moment, then motioned to a bench. "Sit down, daughter. It's time someone knew the truth." What he told her shook the foundations of everything she thought she knew about her family. Ian Cameron had been an honest man, loyal to the McRae clan until his last breath. However, the previous steward, a man named Fraser, had been stealing from the clan for years. When Ian discovered this, Fraser framed him by planting false evidence to make him look guilty. The grandfather of the current Laird McRae had been the law at the time. He was a fair but proud man. When presented with the evidence, he ordered Ian's execution, without further investigation. The Cameron family was stripped of their lands and title and reduced to poverty. "Ewan Fraser is a direct descendant of that man," Seamus finished. "I suspect he knows the truth. The Frey family will keep this secret for generations because if it were discovered that it was all a lie, they would lose everything, their position, their lands, and their honor." "Why didn't he ever say anything?" Mai asked, feeling tears of rage burn her eyes. "Because he had no proof," Seamus replied sadly. "Only rumors and the word of a dying priest who confessed the truth to him on his deathbed. I've been searching for evidence for years, but I've never found anything until now." She told him about the medallion and the documents that Ewan had taken. Seamus's face lit up. "Those documents are the proof. We must tell the Lord immediately." "But Ewan took them," Mary pointed out. "He probably destroyed them already." "Not necessarily." Seamus stood up with renewed energy. "Destroying evidence is risky. It's more likely that he hid them somewhere he can access. We must search for them." But before they could formulate a plan, the sacristy door burst open. Dunkanker entered, his face grave. His gaze immediately went to May, and she saw something in his eyes. Guilt. "Father, I need to talk to you," said Duncan. Then he looked at May. She got up to leave, but he raised a hand. "Wait," he said. "Actually, maybe you should stay. This concerns you too." Seamus and Maya exchanged confused glances. Duncan closed the door carefully and turned to face them. "I know what you found," he said abruptly. "The medallion, the documents." "How?" May began. "Because I've known about the Freer secret for years," Duncan had admitted, the weight of guilt evident in his voice. "My own grandfather was involved in the original conspiracy. He helped Fraser plant the false evidence against Jin Cameron. The silence that followed was devastating. "And you never said anything?" Simus's voice was heavy with disappointment. "I was a child when I found out," Duncan explained. "And when I finally understood what it meant, Eigen threatened me. He said that if I revealed the truth, he would destroy my family and make it look like the Kays were also involved in the original theft." "Cowardice," hissed Mary. "Yes," agreed Duncan, not trying to defend himself. "It was, and I have lived with that shame every day. But now that the evidence has come to light, I can no longer remain silent. Rurid deserves to know the truth. The clan deserves to know the truth." "Egan will destroy the evidence," said Simus. "He can't," Duncan replied, "because I know where he hides it. There's a secret room behind his office. He keeps all the compromising documents there, including the records that show the discrepancies in the clan's accounts over the years." I felt a spark of hope. "Then we can retrieve them." "It's not that simple," DE warned. "Ewan isn't the only one who wants this secret to remain buried. The Sutherlands know about it too." That made me pause. "What?" Dan nodded grimly. "Lord Alistair discovered the secret months ago. That's partly why he's so determined to have Fiona marry Ruarid. He plans to use this information as leverage. If Ruarid doesn't agree to the marriage, Alistair will reveal that the McRae clan was built on a lie, and that the execution of Jan Cameron was unjust, and that the Cameron lands were stolen. However, that would also condemn the Frasers," Seamus pointed out. "Alistair doesn't care," Duncan explained. "In fact, he prefers it that way. With the Frasers discredited, Rory would need a new steward. Alistair already has his own man lined up for the position. Either way, the Sutherland clan will take control of the McRae clan." The magnitude of the conspiracy was overwhelming. I felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "We have to tell Rory," she insisted. "Now?" asked Duncan. "And what exactly are we going to tell him?" "That his clan is built on a lie, that the man he trusts most is a fraud, that he is being manipulated on all sides." "The truth," Maya replied firmly. "He deserves the truth." Before Duncan could respond, a scream echoed from outside. The three of them ran to the window. There was commotion in the castle courtyard. Guards were running back and forth, and at the center of the chaos, Lady Fiona could be seen pointing dramatically towards Myrie's cottage, which was engulfed in flames. May felt her heart stop. All her possessions, the few memories of her family and her carefully cultivated herbs, were being consumed by the fire. Without thinking, she ran outside, followed by Duncan and Simus. By the time they reached the courtyard, a crowd had gathered. Fiona was at the center of it, her face a mask of feigned concern. "Thank heaven someone saw the smoke," she exclaimed. "The poor girl could have been inside." But May was foolish. She could see the triumph in Fiona's eyes and how calculatedly she had staged this scene. "How did it start?" asked Ewan Fraser, suddenly appearing among the crowd. "I have no idea," replied Fiona, pausing dramatically. "I heard some of the maids mention that Mayuri had been experimenting with flammable herbs. Perhaps it was an accident." It was a blatant lie, but an effective one. Murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Suspicious glances turned towards May. "That's not true," protested May. "I would never. What is going on here?" Rory's voice cut through the air like a sword. The crowd parted as he made his way through. His face was a mask of controlled fury. His eyes found May, scanning her body as if to check that she was unharmed. Something in his expression softened for a moment. Then he saw her cabin burning, and the rage returned. "Someone explain this to me now." Fiona stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. "Ruarid, dear," she said, "it was a terrible accident. Meyer has lost everything, but thank God she wasn't home. We must make sure she has somewhere to stay." "An accident," My voice sounded louder than I intended. That's a lie! Silence fell over the crowd. A peasant accusing a noblewoman of lying? It was unthinkable. Fiona's face hardened. Be careful with your words, child. Unfounded accusations have consequences. Unfounded. May felt years of humiliation and rage bubbling up inside her. I was in the castle all morning. There's no way I could have started that fire. But you made it clear that you wanted me out of the castle. You wanted to destroy me. This is absurd, Fiona exclaimed, turning to Rorid. Are you going to allow a servant to speak to me like this? But Rorid wasn't looking at Fiona. He was looking at May. In his eyes, she saw something that made her hold her breath. He believed her. His voice was soft but firm. You are accusing Lady Fiona of burning down your house. Mai knew she was on a precipice. One more word and there would be no turning back. It would destroy any hope of peace or security. But Father Seamus's words echoed in her mind. The clan deserves the truth. Not only that, her firm voice replied, now I accuse her of conspiracy. She and her father plan to destroy this clan and manipulate and control you. And they are not alone. There are others in this castle who are keeping secrets that could change everything. A shockwave rippled through the crowd. Ewan Fraser stepped forward, his face red with anger. This is too much, roared my lord. This woman has clearly lost her mind. She's accusing a nobleman without proof. She's causing trouble. I have proof, Miri interrupted, her heart pounding wildly. Documents that show treason. A medallion that reveals buried lies. Secrets that some have kept hidden for generations. She saw Ewan pale, Duncan close his eyes briefly, and Fiona smile a cold, victorious smile. How convenient, Fiona said softly. Where are the documents and medallions you supposedly have now? May swallowed hard. That was the problem. She had the evidence. They had been confiscated, she admitted, but nothing more. Fiona turned to the crowd. A desperate peasant woman who has lost everything is making wild accusations without proof. It's really quite sad. Clearly the shock of the fire has affected her. I can confirm her story, said Duncan, stepping forward. Everyone turned to him in shock. Duncan is Lairt's most loyal warrior and Rorid's closest friend. Duncan, what are you doing? Ewan hissed. But Duncan ignored him, looking only at Rorid. My Lord Meyer speaks the truth. There are secrets in this castle that must come to light. Secrets of betrayal, injustice, and manipulation. I have been a coward for too long in keeping silent. Rarith's expression was unmistakable. Speak. No, Father Seamus intervened, appearing from the crowd, not in front of everyone. But the boy speaks the truth, my lord, he continued. I think it's time for a private conversation. You, me, Dankin, Ewan, and my Cameron. It should be you, me, Dankin, Ewan, and my Cameron, because what she has discovered affects the future of this entire clan. Lord Alastair Sutherland, who had been watching silently until now, finally spoke. And us, he said, his voice cold. The future allies of the MacRae clan do not deserve to be present. No, Rory replied firmly. This is a matter for the MacRae clan. You and your daughter are guests here, nothing more. The insult was clear. Alistair narrowed his eyes dangerously. Be careful, MacRae. Insults have consequences. It does breaking agreements. Are you threatening me? Rorid's voice was deadly and still. I am simply stating facts, Alistair replied. You have 2 weeks until the wedding. The agreement is signed. If you break it, there will be repercussions. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Finally, Rorid spoke up. Everyone to the Great Hall. Ian, Duncan, and Father Seamus, you three disperse now. As the crowd dispersed reluctantly, Fiona approached May, her voice so low that only May could hear it. You made a big mistake, peasant girl. Before, I just wanted to scare you. Now I'm going to destroy you. May lifted her chin. You can try to... As they followed Rorid into the castle, May felt the weight of what she had set in motion. There was no turning back. The truth would now come out, no matter the cost. She feared the cost would be higher than any of them could imagine. The great hall of MacRae Castle had never felt so small and stifling. Rorid stood facing the fire with his back to the others, clenching his fists behind his back as he processed everything he had just heard. Duncan had spoken first, confessing the secret he had carried for years. Then Father Simus explained the full story of Ian Cameron and the injustice that had been perpetrated against him. Finally, Mai had recounted how he had found the medallion and the documents. The silence that followed was oppressive. Ewan Fraser was as pale as death, sitting rigidly in his chair, clearly searching for ways to deny, deflect, and save himself. "It's true," he said. Rurid's voice finally broke the silence. He didn't turn around. He couldn't bear to look at Ewan yet. "Everything they said is true." Ewan opened his mouth, then closed it again. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Yes," his voice was barely a whisper. "My ancestor was the one who betrayed Ian Cameron, and my family has kept that secret for generations." Ruarid finally turned, and the fury in his eyes was so intense that Duncan instinctively stepped forward, ready to intervene if necessary. "I have the documents that Mairi found," Ewan admitted. "They're hidden. I thought that if they never came to light, the past could remain buried." "The past," said Ruarid in a dangerously calm voice. "That past ruined an entire family and turned honorable people into outcasts. All this time, my family has lived with the guilt of an unjust execution without knowing. I'm sorry." He looked up. There were tears in his eyes. "Rurid, I have served your family faithfully. Everything else I have done has been honest. This curse is something I inherited, not a betrayal I chose. But you chose to remain silent," Father Siamus pointed out. "Every day that passed without revealing the truth was a choice." Rurid ran a hand over his face and suddenly looked years older. He looked at May, who had remained silent throughout, and noticed a change in her expression. "Cameron," she said slowly, "your last name is Cameron. You are a descendant of Ian Cameron." "I believe so," May replied. "My grandmother always said our family had seen better days, but she never wanted to talk about it. Now I understand why." Rurid closed his eyes briefly. "Not only did my family execute your ancestor unjustly, they also stole your land, your title, and your future." "It wasn't your fault," Mee said softly. "This happened generations before you were born, but it's my responsibility to make it right," he replied firmly. "If what they say is true and those documents prove Ian Cameron's innocence, then justice must be done." Ewan stood up abruptly. "And what about justice for my family? We will be punished for the crimes of our ancestors. You kept the secret," Duncan reminded him. "That makes you an accomplice." "To protect my family," Ewan shouted. "What would you have done in my place?" "The truth," Duncan replied simply. "I should have told the truth years ago, regardless of the cost. And so should you." Before Ewan could respond, the door to the room burst open. Lady Morag entered, breathless and clearly agitated. "My lord," she began, "forgive the interruption, but there is a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Lady Fiona has sent messengers to all the neighboring clans," Morag explained. "She is telling them that Laird McRae is being manipulated by a peasant girl with pretensions of nobility, that the clan is in chaos." Rory cursed. "How long ago was this?" "The messengers left an hour ago, and there are more." Morag hesitated. "Lord Sutherland has threatened not only to withdraw the marriage offer, but also to reveal damaging information about the clan." "If you are not reasonable," he added. "Let me guess," Rurid said bitterly. "He knows about the Frasers and the Cameron's secret?" Morag nodded. "He's been doing research since he arrived. He has his own copies of the compromising documents." "Of course he does." Rarith slumped in his chair. "This is a complete disaster." "Not necessarily," said Mai, surprising everyone. "If Lord Sherlin reveals the secret, he won't just be condemning himself. He'll be showing that he was willing to use information about a historical injustice as a political weapon rather than seeking justice." "Nobles don't care about such subtleties," Ewan replied. "All they care about is power." "Then perhaps," Mai said, her voice growing stronger, "it's time to stop playing by their rules. My lord, you have a choice. You can marry Fiona, keep the secret buried, and live with the guilt and the Sutherland's control for the rest of your life. Or you can do the right thing. Reveal the truth yourself. Restore my family's honor and face the consequences with dignity." The consequences could mean the ruin of the clan, Ewan warned. And what is the alternative, Miri challenged? To live under the Sutherland's thumb, to build on lies. Ruarid looked at her for a long moment, and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition that they were in this together, no matter what happened. You're right, he said finally. I've spent my whole life making the practical choice, the safe choice, and it has brought the clan to this vulnerable, manipulated, and trapped point. Perhaps it's time to make the right choice no matter the cost. Ruarit, Duncan began. No, Ruarit said, raising a hand. My decision is made. I will call a full council of the clan. Tomorrow at dawn, I will reveal everything. The Fraser secret, the injustice against the Camerons, and the Sutherland manipulations. I will reveal the Fraser secret, the injustice against the Camerons, and the Sutherland manipulations, and then I will let the clan decide our course of action. It's risky, Father Seamus warned, but it's honorable. Then it's decided. Rurid stood up. Ewan, bring all the documents you've been hiding, everything. If we're going to do this, we'll do it properly. Ewan nodded miserably and left to retrieve them. When he was gone, Rurid approached May. This puts you in danger, he said quietly. The Sutherlands will stop at nothing to silence you now. I know, she replied, but I can't back down, not when there's finally a chance to clear my family's name. I'll keep you safe, he promised, whatever it takes. Before she could respond, an explosion rocked the castle. Everyone rushed to the windows. One of the storage buildings at the training ground was on fire, but this was no accident. The fire was too big and too sudden. Sabotage, said Duncan grimly. The Sutherlands are escalating, suggested Father Seamus. Or it's a distraction to keep us busy while they finish the sentence. Everyone understood. While the guards rushed to extinguish the flames, someone could be carrying out another worse attack. Rurid made decisions quickly. Duncan, take men and secure the castle. Check every entrance in every secret passage. Father, take Maella and stay with her. Don't let her out of your sight. And you, asked Maella, I'm going to have a very frank conversation with Lord Sutherland and his daughter. The determination in his voice was absolute. Mai was escorted to the chapel by Father Seamus, passing through corridors filled with smoke and chaos. The castle was in a state of pandemonium. Servants were running in all directions. Guards were shouting orders, and the crackling of fire could be heard echoing in the distance. When they finally reached the chapel, Seamus locked the door behind them. You'll be safe here, he assured her. It's sacred ground. Even the Sutherlands would think twice before violating the sanctuary. But Mai was uneasy. She walked towards the altar, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had set everything in motion. She had exposed secrets buried for generations, and now people were in danger because of it. Did I do the right thing? She asked quietly. Seamus sat down on one of the pews, looking weary. The truth is always the right thing, he replied. But that doesn't mean it's easy or that it comes without a bomb. What if the cost is too high and I destroy the clan trying to save my family's honor? You're not destroying anything, Seamus replied firmly. Lies destroy. Truth builds, even when it hurts. The hours passed, the sound of the fire eventually died down, replaced by the murmur of voices and the movement of people. May wondered what was happening, what Ruarid was saying to the Sutherlands, and what decisions were being made without her. Finally, when night had fallen completely, footsteps could be heard outside the chapel. Seamus tensed, placing himself protectively in front of May. The door opened to reveal Lady Morak, accompanied by 2 Macrae guards. Come, she said abruptly. The Laird requires you. They were now escorted back to the Great Hall, which was not empty this time. The entire clan council was gathered. 50 men and women representing the most important Macrae families. In the center, facing each other like gladiators in an arena, were Ruarid and Alistair Sutherland. Ah, finally, Alistair said with a cold smile when he saw May, the star of our little drama. How timely. Ruarid ignored the comment. Father Seamus, please take a seat. Everyone deserves to hear this. Over the next hour, Ruarid recounted the entire story. Ewan confirmed every detail with the recovered documents spread out in front of him. Dunan added his own confession, and Father Seamus provided the historical context. The council listened in growing silence. Shock and anger were etched on their faces as the magnitude of the betrayal was revealed. When they had finished, Alistair clapped slowly, the sound echoing in the silence. "What a moving story," he said sarcastically. "And now what? Will you restore a peasant girl to nobility based on documents from 100 years ago? You will dishonor the freers, who have served faithfully for generations. All for pride." "Not for pride," Laird replied, "but for justice." "Justice does not feed a clan," Alistair countered. "It does not protect borders. It does not secure the future. Marriage to my daughter does all of that. This exercise in moral rectitude only weakens you." "Then we disagree on what constitutes strength," Laird said coldly. Alistair smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Very well," he continued. "I withdraw my offer of marriage and my offer of alliance. Furthermore, I will consider any action you take against the Frasers as an insult to me. Do you understand what that means?" It was a thinly veiled threat of war. One of the elders of the council stood up. "My lord, reconsider." "Losing the Sutherland alliance is a price I will gladly pay," Laird interrupted, "because I have come to realize something. A clan built on lies and fear is not a clan worth preserving. I would rather be poor but honorable than rich and corrupt." Murmurs rippled through the council. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked horrified by the implications. Fiona, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was like broken glass. "All this," she said, pointing at May, a peasant girl with dirt under her fingernails. "You are really going to destroy your clan for a woman who can never be your equal." "You are right about one thing," Laird replied, his voice clear for all to hear. "She's not my equal. She's better. She has more honor in one finger than all the Suderlanders put together." The silence that followed was absolute. May felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Alas stood up slowly. "Very well, you have made your choice. Now live with the consequences." "I was hoping you would say that." Laird walked over to his chair, where he had stored a rolled-up document. "While you were busy with your little intrigues, I was busy too." He unrolled the document and held it up. May recognized the seal. It was from the Campbell clan, one of the most powerful in the Highlands. "An alternative alliance," Laird explained. "The Campbells have been looking for a partner in the north. I offered them access to our ports in exchange for military protection and resources. They accepted." Lastier's face turned red. "Lies. The Campbells would never." "It's already been signed," Laird interrupted, clearly enjoying the moment. "While you were busy burning huts and staging sabotage, I was securing my clan's future. A future that does not include you." That was the last straw. Alistair lunged forward, his hand flying towards his sword, but before he could draw it, Duncan and 3 other guards blocked his way. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Duncan warned, his own sword halfway to Senvenar. For a moment it looked as if violence would erupt. Then Alistair forced himself to calm down, though the hatred in his eyes was palpable. "This doesn't end here, McCree. You've made an enemy today." "He was already my enemy," Laird replied. "Only now I know it." The Satterlands left, along with their servants and guards. The castle seemed to exhale collectively as the gates closed behind them. But the tension remained. The council was still waiting. They were waiting for Rorit's verdict on Iwan. More importantly, they were waiting for his decision on the future of the clan. Rorit turned to Iwan Fraser. "You have served my family for years. You have been loyal in many ways," he began, "but you have also perpetuated an injustice for too long." He paused. "Therefore, I dismiss you as steward of the castle with immediate effect." Ewan nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I accept, my lord." "However," Laird continued, "I will not take away your lands or your title. Your children will not pay for the crimes of your ancestors. But this position requires complete trust, and that trust has been broken." It was a fair sentence, and everyone in the room knew it. Iwan withdrew, a broken man, but not destroyed. Then Rory turned to Mayuri. "My Cameron," he said, "descendant of Jane Cameron, who was unjustly executed by this clan." His formal voice echoed in the hall. On behalf of the McRaes, I offer a formal apology. The lands confiscated from your family will be returned. The title that was stripped away will be returned. Mai could not speak. She could not comprehend the significance of this. After a century of shame, the restoration of her family's honor was overwhelming. And more than that, Ruaritz continued, his voice softening slightly, I offer you a position in this castle, not as a servant, but as an advisor. Your knowledge of herbs, your intelligence, and your courage are needed here. The clan needs you. The murmuring of the council grew louder. Having a woman and former peasant in a position of power was almost unheard of, but Ruarid raised a hand to silence them. I have made my decision. Anyone who cannot live with it is free to leave. No one left. May finally found her voice. My lord, she began, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Ruarid replied simply. Say that you will stay and help build something better from the ruins of the past. She looked around the room at the faces watching her. Some looked at her with approval, some with doubt, but they were all waiting for her answer. Yes, she said finally, I will stay. The relief on Ruarid's face was palpable. Seeing that the drama was over, the council began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. Once they were finally alone, just Ruarid, May, Duncan, and Father Seamus, the Laird slumped into his chair, looking suddenly exhausted. I hope I did the right thing, he murmured. You did, Duncan assured him, squeezing his friend's shoulder. For the first time in a long time, you did the right thing, regardless of the mod. May slowly approached Ruarid, aware that something had changed between them. They were no longer lord and peasant. They were something else, something neither of them knew how to name. Thank you, she said softly, for believing in me, for risking everything. He looked up, and in his eyes she saw something that took her breath away. I didn't just do it for you, he admitted. I did it for myself too, because I've spent my whole life doing what others expected. And for once, I wanted to do what I knew was right. What my heart told me was right. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. But before they could say more, Lady Morag rushed in, her face pale. My lord, she gasped, there is a problem, a serious problem. What now? One of the maids has disappeared, Morag explained, and with her, several important documents from your study. We believe she was a spy for the Suzlans. Ruarid cursed. What documents? Those related to the Campbell alliance, Morag replied grimly, and some personal ones. My heart sank. He knew exactly what kind of personal documents could cause problems. Letters and notes that could suggest an inappropriate relationship between Laird and a peasant girl, for example. The Sutherlands are going to use this, said Duncan. They're going to try to destroy your reputation and make you look weak and controlled by a woman. Let them try, Ruarid replied. I don't care anymore, but May does. A Laird without honor was a Laird without power, and an LD without power could not protect his clan. The war had only just begun, and this time it would be worse than any battle they had faced before. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of activity and tension. Ruarid's spies reported that the Sutherlands were gathering support among the neighboring clans by spreading rumors that Laird McCree had lost his mind and was under the control of a peasant woman with ambitions for power. The stolen documents had been circulated, edited, and manipulated to paint the most damaging picture possible. Mai barely slept. She had accepted her new position, but now she wondered if it had been a terrible mistake. Every suspicious glance from the castle servants and every whispered conversation behind her back reminded her that no matter how many lands or titles were returned to her, she would always be seen by many as the peasant woman who had seduced the lord. It was midnight when she heard a knock on her door. She now lived in the castle in small but dignified rooms near the advisor's wing. When she opened the door, she found Lady Morag standing there with a grave expression. Get dressed, she ordered without preamble, and come with me, it's urgent. May followed her through dark corridors until they reached a door that she recognized as being Ruarid's private study. Morag touched a specific pattern on the door and it opened. Inside, she found not only Ruarid, but also Duncan, Father Seamus, and 3 men she did not recognize. They all had serious, almost somber faces. What's going on? Mary asked. Sit down. Laird pointed to a chair. There are things you need to know. One of the men stepped forward. He was older, with gray hair and shrewd eyes. I am of the Campbell clan, he said, introducing himself. I am the Campbell clan chief's cousin. Mai felt her stomach sink. The alternative alliance. This had to do with that. The Satterlands are making their move, Clan Campbell continued. They have convinced the Gordons and the Morrisons that the McCrees are weak. They plan to attack and divide the McCree lands among themselves. When? Asked Duncan. Within a week, perhaps less, replied the clan. Unless what? Pressed Laird. The clan looked directly at Mai. Unless you publicly withdraw your claims to the Cameron lands and disappear, they said. The silence that followed was deafening. Absolutely not, Laird finally said. Hear me out, the clan insisted. The Sutherlands have made this a matter of honor, not about justice or truth, but about whether a layman can be ruled by a common woman. If my son renounces everything I know and leaves, they lose their main narrative. The McCree clan will lose its honor too, Father Seamus pointed out, because everyone will know that we gave in to threats. Honor does not protect against swords, replied the clan pragmatically. I need to be honest with you, McCree. Even with the Campbell alliance, your position is weak. 3 clans against 2 is not a favorable ratio. We need time to gather more allies, and the quickest way to buy that time is to remove their main motivation for attacking. Now Mai felt the weight of all eyes on her. Mai now felt the weight of all eyes on her. She knew what they were thinking and what they dared not say, that it would be easier if she simply left. Then I'll leave, she said quietly. No, said Laird, stepping forward. I'm not asking you that. You're not asking, she replied, looking him in the eye. I'm offering. If my presence puts the clan in danger, it's not my presence that's the problem, Laird interrupted. The Sutherlands' greed and manipulation are the problem, but I can solve it, she insisted. Or at least buy time, as Mr. Campbell says. Dan intervened, his voice unusually soft. Mary, if you do this, there will be no turning back. Publicly renouncing your lands after the whole clan knows the truth would destroy you. I'd rather be destroyed than see innocent people die in a war caused by me, she replied. This is exactly what the Sutherlands want, Father Seamus pointed out, to divide us and make us renounce our principles. The clan sighed. Understand me. I admire her moral stance, but I am here to prevent bloodshed. We can relinquish the Cameron lands temporarily and revisit the issue when the waters have calmed and we have more allies. What if it never calms? Rory challenged. What if there is always a reason to wait? The clan had no answer to that. Mai stood up. I need air, she announced. Discuss this without me. Whatever the decision, I will accept it. She left before anyone could stop her and walked quickly through the corridors until she reached the outer wall of the castle. It was a cold and clear night, the stars shining like diamonds in the black sky. Leaning against the cold stone, she finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the situation. She had fought so hard for justice and her family's honor, yet now she would have to sacrifice everything to save the very clan that had ordered her ancestors' death. The irony was cruel. I knew I would find you here. She turned to see Laird approaching alone, without guards or advisors, just a man coming to talk to a woman. Have you made a decision? She asked. I made a decision, he replied. I told everyone to leave. She couldn't help but smile slightly. Very diplomatic. I've never been good at diplomacy, he admitted, stopping beside her and looking out at the dark horizon. I'm better with swords. This can't be solved with swords, I know. That's why I'm talking to you instead of ordering preemptive strikes. They stood in silence for a moment, 2 lonely figures against the vastness of the night sky. What do you want me to do? Mary finally asked. Laird turned to look directly at her. I want you to do what your heart tells you. Not what is practical or political, but what is true. My heart says many things, she replied softly. Some are contradictory. Tell me about them. Mary took a deep breath. She had come too far to be shy. Now my heart says that I loved my family, even in those I never knew. It says that their honor matters, but it also says that I love this clan, these lands and these people, even those who look at me with suspicion. She paused, then said other things I shouldn't feel. Like what? She looked at him, saw the intensity in his eyes, and made the bravest decision of her life. I love you, she said. Not the Lord, but the man who knelt in the mud to help me. The man who risked everything for the truth. The man who carries the weight of the world, but never complains. The silence that followed was so complete that she could hear her own heart beating. May's voice was hoarse. I know it's impossible, she continued quickly. I know that even with land and a title, I will never be good enough for a lord. I know there are women who are more beautiful, more educated, more... He kissed her. It was a kiss filled with weeks of pent-up longing and unspoken words, impossibilities confronted. His hands sank into her hair as he pulled her closer, and she clung to him as if he were an anchor in a storm. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. There is no one more suitable, Ruarid said, his forehead resting against hers. There is no one braver, more honorable, more perfect. I have been a fool for not telling you sooner. Ruarid, we can't, she began, but he silenced her with another gentler kiss. This time I can, and I will, he said with determination. My Cameron, I don't care if we have to face 3 clans or 30. I don't care if I lose land or title. I want you by my side as my advisor, my equal, and my wife. She felt tears running down her face. That will destroy or build everything, he countered. I've spent my whole life making decisions based on fear. Fear of losing the clan, fear of failing my father, fear of not being enough. And those decisions almost destroyed us anyway. Maybe it's time to make a decision based on hope instead. It's a beautiful idea, she said sadly, but the world doesn't work that way. Then let's change how the world works. Before Mai could respond, footsteps echoed on the stone stairs. Dunan appeared, panting. Sorry to interrupt, he said, his expression serious. A messenger from the Sutherlands has just arrived. The moment was broken. Ruarid straightened up, instantly reverting to leader mode. What do they want now? They offer a neutral audience, Duncan explained. Tomorrow, on MacLeod clan land, Alistair wants to negotiate. It's a trap, me said immediately. Probably, Duncan agreed, but refusing could be seen as cowardice or guilt. Ruarid cursed. Of course. Damned if I do, damned if I don't. There's something else. Duncan hesitated. They specifically requested that I be present. They claimed to have evidence that must be confronted directly. Mai's bad feeling grew stronger than ever. What kind of evidence? They wouldn't say, but whatever it was, they clearly thought it was damaging. Rarit took Miri's hand. You don't have to go. I can face this alone. No, she replied, squeezing his hand back. If I'm going to be your advisor and your equal, then I'll face all your battles with you. Then it's decided. Ruarid turned to Duncan. Send a reply. We accept, but on our terms, neutral territory, witnesses from at least 3 clans, and no weapons allowed in the hearing room. I will. Duncan started to leave, then paused. Ruarid, he said, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing with all of this. When he left, Ruarid and Macaron were alone again. Tomorrow could change everything, she said. It already has, he replied, touching her cheek gently. Whatever happens tomorrow, I won't regret this, or us, Mary whispered. The 2 figures remained under the stars, knowing that the battles they would face at dawn could only be won by the heart, not the sword. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold. Mary dressed carefully, choosing simple yet dignified clothes. Not noble, nor humble, but something in between, a reflection of her own impossible position. The journey to MacLeod territory took several hours. MacLeod Castle was neutral, renowned for its impartial justice. It was the perfect place for such a hearing, which made May suspicious. The Sutherlands never did anything that did not benefit them. When they arrived, the Great Hall was already full. There were representatives of the Gordon, Morrison, Campbell, and of course, Sutherland clans. Lord MacLeod presided from his raised chair, his face expressionless. Let us begin, announced Lord Sutherland. It was you who requested this hearing. State your case. A lass of Sutherland stood up, the very picture of offended dignity. Thank you, Lord MacLeod. I am here to reveal a painful truth. Laird McKay has been deceived by a woman with false pretensions and dark ambitions, he said, pointing at My Cameron claims to be descended from a man executed for treason a century ago, but I have evidence suggesting that this connection is fabricated. May felt her blood run cold. And Rurid stepping forward. That is a serious accusation. I hope you have proof. I do. Alistair gestured and one of his men brought in a chest. It contained genealogical records of the Cameron family, showing that Mai is descended not from Jin Cameron, but from his younger brother, who never claimed any land or title. Alistair opened the chest, revealing documents that looked old and authentic. They're forgeries, said Mai immediately, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Are they? Alistair smiled. Father Seamus, would you examine these documents? As the McCree clan's historian, your opinion would be invaluable. Seamus approached, his face grave, and examined the documents carefully. His expression became more and more concerned with each page. These appear to be authentic, he finally admitted, and Mayer's heart sank. The signature, the seal, the paper, everything corresponds to the correct period. That's impossible, Duncan protested. We have verified Mayer's direct descent from Yane. Based on what? Alistair challenged. Family stories and rumors. I have official documents. Documents that have conveniently just appeared, Rurid pointed out. After we revealed the truth about the Frasers, are you suggesting that I forged them? Alistair feigned indignation. These documents have been in my family's archives for generations. I just didn't think they were relevant until this woman started making claims. It was a brilliant idea. He had to admit it. Even if the documents were fake, they were convincing enough to cast doubt. In a society where bloodline was everything, doubt was as destructive as proof. Even if this were true, Rory said, keeping his voice steady, it doesn't change the fact that Jane Cameron was executed unjustly. No, Alastair raised an eyebrow, because if Myery has no legitimate claim, then this whole situation looks very different. It looks like an ambitious woman using a historical tragedy to advance her own position, and a lord so distracted by her that he can't see he's being manipulated. The murmur of the audience grew. He could see doubt, speculation, and judgment on their faces. It was Laird MacLeod who spoke next. These are serious accusations. Millie Cameron, do you have anything to say in your defense? She stood up, feeling the weight of every gaze on her. She could lie, protest, or fight, or she could do something completely different. I don't know if those documents are real or fake, she said honestly. I'm not a historian. I don't have access to old archives. The only thing I know for sure is that my grandmother told me stories about a family who were once honorable, but who were destroyed by false accusations. I believe those stories, but maybe I was wrong. Ma, what are you doing? Rurid whispered. She ignored him and continued. If I was wrong, if I have no right to those lands or that title, then I publicly renounce them here. Not now. Rory tried to stop her, but she raised a hand and continued, her voice growing stronger. I renounce it not because Lord Sherlin intimidates me, nor because I am afraid. I renounce it because I have learned something in these last few weeks. True nobility does not come from lands or titles. It comes from how you treat others and from standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. If my presence causes division and war, then it would be unworthy of a noble person to continue my claim, no matter how legitimate it may be. The silence in the room was absolute. However, she added, looking directly at Alistair, I also renounce any pretense that this solves the real problem. The real problem is that there are men in this room who use honor and justice as tools of manipulation. Men who are willing to lightly threaten and destroy to get what they want. That is not nobility, it is cowardice. How dare you? Alastair turned red with rage. I dare, replied Mayer calmly, because I have nothing left to lose. I have already renounced the lands. My reputation is already ruined. But at least I can speak the truth before I go. Leave. Ruarid's voice was filled with panic. May turned to him, tears finally escaping from her eyes. This is what has to happen, Ruarid. We both know it. As long as I'm here, the Sherlins will have a way to use me against you. But if I leave, if I disappear completely, They won't. Roar-eyed took her by the shoulders. I will not let you go. It is not your choice, she said softly. It is mine, and I am making it. Before he could respond, a new voice spoke from the back of the room. Excuse the interruption. Everyone turned. An elderly woman had entered, leaning heavily on a cane. She was dressed simply but neatly, and although her eyes were clouded by age, they were sharp and intelligent. Who are you, oh? Demanded Laird McCood. My name is Else Cameron, replied the woman. I am the older sister of Mai's grandmother. Mai felt her knees weaken. She had heard stories about great-aunt Elspeth, but thought she had died years ago. I heard there was a hearing about the Cameron family, Elspeth continued, walking slowly to the front. And I thought it was time for someone who really knows the truth to speak up. Alistair looked nervous for the first time. This woman is clearly senile. She can't. I'm over 90 years old, interrupted Elspeth, but my mind is as clear as young water. And I remember the stories my father told me about your grandfather and the Camerons. Stories about your grandfather and Cameron. She pulled an object wrapped in cloth from her cloak. Slowly she unwrapped it, revealing an old, worn book and that it was clearly well cared for. This is Jane Cameron's diary, she announced. It has been passed down from generation to generation in our family, hidden because revealing its existence would have been dangerous. Father Seamus approached reverently. I can. She handed it to him. Seamus opened it carefully, scanning the pages with his eyes. It's authentic. The Gaelic confirmed it. The style of writing. This was written in the early 17th century. If you look at the last entry, Elspeth said, you will see that Jane specifically mentions her children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. The eldest of these was Maire's great-great-grandfather. Seamus read the page, then looked up with an expression of amazement. She's right. This proves the direct line. May is a legitimate descendant. Alistair's face turned purple. That could be forged, he said, just as my documents were accused of being. But Elspeth interjected with a sly smile. This diary contains the names of people who are still alive and events that can be verified. More importantly, she pulled another document from her cloak. I have Ian's marriage certificate, she said, signed by the priest at the time, which clearly shows all his children as legitimate. It was checkmate. Alistair had no answer. Lear MacLeod stood up. In light of this new evidence, she said, I declare that Mai Cameron's claim is legitimate. The lands will be restored to her, as promised by Lord Macree. This is an outrage, Alistair exploded. You can't. Yes, we can, MacLeod interrupted firmly. I suggest you withdraw your documents before I examine them more closely and decide if they are deliberate forgeries, because that would be a much more serious matter. Seeing himself defeated, Alistair gathered his things abruptly. This isn't over, Macrae, he hissed as he passed. Have you made a powerful enemy today? No, Rorid replied calmly. Today, I simply revealed the enemy you have always been. When the Sutherlands left, the tension in the room dissipated. Representatives from the other clans approached Ruarid to offer support and discuss alliances. But Ruarid only had eyes for Mair. He found her standing next to her great-aunt, the two of them embracing each other with tears streaming down their faces. Why didn't you ever come before, Mair asked. Why did you let me live in poverty, thinking I had no one? Because it was dangerous, child, Elspeth replied. The Freers still held power, and I was old. I couldn't protect you. But when I heard what you were facing and what you had discovered, I knew it was time to risk everything. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for believing in me. Rued approached, and Els studied him with piercing eyes. So you're the lord who's caused such a stir, said Rued, who is in love with Els's grandniece. Yes, Rued replied simply, I am. Elspeth nodded with satisfaction. Good, she said. It's time a Macrae did the right thing for a Cameron. But she raised a wrinkled finger. If you break her heart, Laird, you'll have to answer to Mawathan. Despite everything, Ruarid smiled, understood. The following days were a whirlwind. The Cameron lands were formally restored. Ewan Fraser accepted his new position with grace, publicly acknowledging his ancestors' crimes. Seeing that the Sutherlands had been exposed as manipulators, the Gordon and Morrison clans withdrew their support for any military action. Before the entire clan, Ruurhrit did something no one expected. "My Cameron," he said, kneeling before her in the crowded great hall, "you have taught me that true nobility does not come from titles or lands. It comes from character, courage, and the heart. I would like to spend the rest of my life learning more lessons from you, if you would do me the honor. Will you marry me?" The silence that followed was expectant and filled with amazement. Here was a marriage proposal from the Laird to a woman who, only weeks before, had been the poorest in her clan. She looked at the face raised to hers, saw the love and hope shining in his eyes, and felt her own heart expand until it almost burst. "Yes," her voice said, clear and strong. "1,000 times yes." The hall erupted in celebration, some out of genuine joy and some out of relief that the crisis was over. But Ruari and Mayeri didn't care. Months later, on a summer day when the highlands were in full bloom, the wedding took place. It was simple compared to a traditional Sutherland wedding, but it was authentic. Father Simus married them in the castle's small chapel, with the entire clan present as witnesses. Duncan was the best man, of course, and Lady Morag wept openly, which was something that no one had ever seen before. However, the moment that May would treasure forever came after the ceremony, when she and Ruarid walked together to the East Garden, to the very spot where it had all begun, where a drunken peasant girl had worked the land and felt something that would change both their lives. "You're sorry," Ruarid said, hugging her from behind. "Not at all," May replied, wrapping her arms around him. "Although I have to admit, when I was finishing up on this land months ago, I never imagined I would end up here." "You found more than a medallion in that land," he observed. "You found truth, you found justice, you found love," she suggested, turning to look at him. "I was going to say trouble," he joked, "but love works too." She laughed and kissed him. In that moment, with the sun warming their faces and the scent of wild herbs in the air, everything was perfect. It hadn't been easy, and it never would be. There were still those in the clan who murmured that a former peasant girl should not be his lady. There were still political challenges and threats from enemies and responsibilities that weighed on them both. But they had something that no political alliance could provide: true love, built on mutual respect, honesty, and the courage to choose each other again and again, no matter the cost. True love, built on mutual respect, honesty, and the courage to choose each other again and again, no matter the cost. As Myri looked to the future with Ruarid's hand intertwined with hers, she knew that they had built more than just a marriage. They had built a legacy not of land or titles, but of truth and honor. And she decided that was the truest nobility of all. If you're feeling excited after reading this epic romance set in the Highlands, check out our Highland Romance channel. Every day, we bring you new stories of brave lords, feisty women, buried secrets and loves that defy everything. From misty castles to battles for honor. From first glances that change everything to endings that will make you believe in true love. Subscribe so you don't miss a single story. Turn on the notification bell to receive alerts for each new episode. We'll see you in the Highlands, where every stone holds a secret and every heart holds a love waiting to blossom. Yes,